everybody, me and Buster Green here. Now, I typically review anime and video games, but F it. Right now it's the holidays, and for some weird reason, I want to watch The Twilight Zone. I guess my brain is kind of programmed to do it because when I was a kid, they used to air marathons of The Twilight Zone like every year around Christmas or New Year's, pretty much every single winter break. I never understood the logic to it, other than it was an easy marathon to marathon a classic show on a day when everyone is off. But as it turns out, there's also possibly an explanation that rumor has it Christmas Eve is Rod Serling's birthday. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but if it is, that's pretty funky. If it's not, then people are just grasping at straws. Anyway, I need to remind everyone that to get monetized right now, I need 910 watch hours in the next 11 months, which I kind of feel like I'm never going to get to, but if you guys could at least watch my content for 1 hour today, I would appreciate it. Anyway, so every so often they try to reboot The Twilight Zone, and it never works. Sometimes people get killed, and you ultimately never get a satisfying product. In 2019, Jordan Peele produced another reboot that, to its credit, tried extremely hard to adhere to what made the original Twilight Zone work, while also trying to update that for modern audiences. And I think it was a really good attempt at trying to do the show justice. Plus, it also has the original 1960s opening and ending themes intact, and that's pretty cool regardless. Now, I think this new show would have worked out great if not for the small oversight that was produced to promote the absolutely horrible streaming service CBS All Access, which in a short 3 years no longer exists. What a twist! A Twilight Zone style twist, matter. So, unfortunately, that killed the show. Gah. But hey, actually, even though it's dead, reruns of it are still out there, and the reruns are now on Paramount Plus, which I have, so let me see if they're good at all. Because it's the holidays, and you know what? I need a Twilight Zone fix. Oh, and yeah, going forward in this video, I'm going to spoil literally every single episode of The Twilight Zone Season 1, so if you have any interest in watching that unspoiled, just click this out now and watch another one of my videos. So for the rest of this video, I'm just going to go over Season 1 of the Twilight Zone reboot, and kind of review every single episode. Alright, so the first episode, I think I've seen this one already because if I remember correctly, they released this one on YouTube to promote the show and trick people into buying CBS All Access. Quite frankly, the first episode is not a good episode. It's a very classic Twilight Zone episode, but overall it's like a total C tier episode. So yeah, this might not have been the best one to sell the show. I think this episode has the most notable talent. Like, for example, Kumail Nanjiani is the star here, and he plays this untalented stand-up comedian. Yeah, that works for him because he's kind of an untalented stand-up comedian. Anyway, and the show, his life completely sucks until Tracy Morgan shows up in a weird capacity where you don't really know what his deal is. Maybe he's the devil. I'm thinking he's probably the devil, but you don't say who he is, so you just gotta kind of accept that whatever he is he's something. Maybe he's a Shinigami from Death Note because he essentially gives Camille the power to kill anyone who makes fun of his stand-up set. Except they're not quite killed, it's literally they're erased from existence. And consequently, anything they did in their life is also erased, which is super, super grim in the end. He starts by killing his cat, then his nephew, then he goes full Light Yagami and kills a series of random scum on society kind of people. Until he accidentally kills his girlfriend's mentor, which causes a massive shockwave effect of making his girlfriend a loser, and by destroying his girlfriend's life, he destroys his own. So then in the end of the show, he ends up using his power to erase himself from existence in a pretty cool Deus Ex Machina ending, and this also creates a feedback loop where now Tracy Morgan is just going to give these same evil powers to someone else. So honestly, yeah, this episode is a C tier. The ending I can kind of respect. The ending was a little bit clever. Actually, I really like the ending because it has that nice perfect circle of horror thing going on. So yeah, going forward, I'm going to score the episode and its ending separately. This episode gets a C, but the ending gets an A. Now I think the second episode is so much stronger. The second episode is Nightmare at 30,000 Feet, which is a kind of wordplay on the old Twilight Zone episode, Nightmare at 3,000 Feet, where, as everyone knows, William Shatner saw a gremlin, and that made him go crazy. Holy F, William Shatner is still alive? He gotta be 100 years old. Anyway, so I expected just an update on the Gremlin episode, but instead, this episode is completely corny. I really wanted to just see the Gremlin again and just be like, oh no, it's a Gremlin in the year 2019. How are they going to deal with that? And the episode does play up a lot of the ways that air travel has changed in the past 50 years since the 1960s, like the overabundant security, the racial profiling of Muslims. Unfortunately, as much as I was dying to see that effing Gremlin, no Gremlin. The bad guy in this one is an evil podcast from the future. Yep. It's an evil podcast from the future that narrates how you're gonna die. Okay. That's not clever at all. It's also really weird that in this episode, this guy has a weird iPod that looks like it's from the 1970s to listen to the evil podcast on. But I don't know about you guys, but I would take a Gremlin way more seriously than an evil podcast from the future. This episode gets a B. Also, the ending also gets a B. The ending is just kind of silly. Episode 3 is probably the most interesting episode and also the most artistic episode that I feel really did something good with the episode format of The Twilight Zone. It's a really cool story about a black woman and her artistic son, and no matter what they do, an evil redneck cop shows up and murders one of them. Now, luckily, the mom has a magic time rewinding machine that she uses to save their lives multiple times. However, no matter how many times she uses her magic, the evil cop shows up and murders one of them. So this is kind of the opposite of the first episode. I would say this episode gets an A, but then the ending of this episode is so goddamn corny. The ending of this episode is just a social justice PSA where they boil it down to, if a racist cop is trying to murder you, make sure you get it on camera. Make sure there are witnesses. Don't get murdered by racist cops. Yeah, so this episode gets an A. The ending, which is too corny, gets a C. Episode 4 almost shows the most promise of any episode, but then completely squanders it with a dumb, corny ending straight out of the 1950s. So after episode 3 featuring a racist serial killer cop, episode 4 is all about a bunch of good guy cops. And the good guy cops are having a happy Christmas party and they're giving out presents, and it's all happy and good and super Christian. Until a mysterious stranger played by Stephen Yeun, dressed as a ska master, shows up in the police station. Now he claims to be a YouTuber from somewhere, and he has a weird futuristic phone that is obviously from a sci-fi movie. And anyway, everyone's just super happy to meet him because these are all nice, plain Christian folks. But anyway, also as it turns out, he drives everyone insane somehow because the big twist is that he's an alien and he took over the world or something. So this episode gets an A, but the ending gets an F for fail. This is probably one of the worst endings of the whole series because it's just like, oh, aliens law. Episode 5. Now, episode 5, I would say is another strong episode. Very, very classic Twilight Zone. It has a very goofy-ass premise of what would happen if a 10-year-old ran for president. And they got this kid that looks exactly like Jonathan Taylor Thomas at his peak. Now, I gotta stop here and assure you guys that the premise of this episode is completely impossible since American law forbids anyone under the age of 35 from running for president. But anyway, once again, bringing out the stars, this episode is told from the point of view of Harold from Harold and Kumar. And he ends up making the kid president just to prove a point. The kid wins the race easily, and obviously, despite having a few problems and being completely unqualified, the kid just wins because he's popular and he's a cute kid. Now, the shit hits the fan when the kid actually does become president, and the kid ends up being a total psychopath. He passes a bunch of immature laws, he pretty much destroys the country, many people die, it's a complete shit show. Alright, now I can see this is some really cool political satire going on here, and I see exactly what they're trying to do here. But, I don't know, it seems a little bit like they're doing a little bit of a parody or an homage to the old Twilight Zone episode with the cornfield boy, who would murder people by teleporting them into a cornfield. Wasn't that cornfield boy Ron Howard? Anyway, in the end, the president boy kills everyone, and it's goofy. The episode gets an A from me. The ending, a little bit weaker, gets a B. Now, episode 6 is another weaker episode. Episode 6 is about a bunch of astronauts going to Mars, and it seems like this is a future where the Earth either has just been destroyed or has been destroyed for a while. And I also got to point out that as far as all of the episodes of the season go, this looks like the cheapest episode because they really didn't have like the budget for like high concept sci-fi, and the spacesuits here look mad cheap. Like, it definitely seems like this is the episode they needed more budget for, and they just didn't have enough. So anyway, this episode is just vague and boring, and the astronauts all like have fights and clash and get space madness on their 2-year trip to Mars. Then one of the astronauts go crazy thinking it's a simulation and he dies, and then the twist is, oh, actually he was right. It was a simulation. Wow. This episode gets a D for being cheap looking, and the ending gets a C for being dumb. Episode 7. So, episode 7 is another classic sci-fi kind of story. It's not a new sci-fi story. This one is very, very cliche. It's a basic premise that a meteor shower brings down a space virus to Earth and causes a pandemic. And also, the space virus turns all the men on Earth into murderous psychopaths. Now, hilariously, no women on the Earth are affected by this. So they just now have to accept that every single man on the Earth is now a psychopath who will kill them for literally any and no specific reason. Once again, I see what they're doing here. This is an allegory. Kind of a clever allegory, kind of an ironic allegory. And once again, they execute it in that classic, corny Twilight Zone style kind of way, where it at least feels like the Twilight Zone, but it feels bad in the way that the Twilight Zone sometimes feels bad. And I'm let down by this because I feel like this premise was so good that in a completely untethered vacuum, Jordan Peele, given the same script, probably could have made the premise completely amazing. But the episode is just too weird and corny, and I guess this episode is trying to be a metaphor for the Me Too movement, but like if the Me Too movement was also predicated on every man on the Earth being affected by an uncontrollable rage virus, which wouldn't that mean that no man was really guilty for his actions? Either way, it ends up being some sad, creepy political stuff mixed with your typical horror movie tropes. Oh, and then at the end of the episode, since every man on Earth is a crazy psychopath, the world just goes full cannibal anarchy. So the ending is super weak. The ending is just like, wow, anyone will turn into a cannibal if they get sick. Winners don't get sick. Winners don't do drugs. I guess you're one drug away from being a rapist cannibal? Yeah, I knew that since 4th grade. Episode B, ending D. Now, episode 8. Episode 8 has the creepiest, most stereotypical, bizarrely anachronistic white bread family I've ever seen. And this family acts like they're straight out of the 1950s, but this episode is also clearly set in 2019 because it's all about ICE. And anyway, this family has an illegal immigrant housekeeper who immediately gets arrested by ICE at the start of the episode. And then the family has to deal with this. But then, hilariously, the family also gets arrested by ICE because the twist here is, what if ICE was slightly worse than they are in real life? Anyway, the illegal immigrants then proceed to tell the white people that ICE are monsters, the prison they threw them in is awful, and they give this like eloquent, elaborate, multi-page speech about how horrible, cruel, and careless ICE is and how it should never be a thing, and how even though white people support illegal immigrants by giving them jobs, they don't support them in the right way by giving them citizenship. And I'm sorry, guys, I really, really don't want to complain about wokeness, but even though I think ICE is a force of pure evil and immigrants definitely deserve basic human rights, this episode is so fucking bad because it's so preachy. It's even more preachier than like episode 3 was in like trying to like subtly address the George Floyd incident. This episode is like literally a 12 out of 10 in terms of preachiness. And I feel like there's a way they could have done this episode without like talking down to white people. It feels childish. It feels like it's super hyper targeted at specifically lower upper class white people who are like kind of rich, but like it's bizarrely specific and it's super cringe. What's also super cringe in this episode is that this episode is loaded with product placement for Grubhub. Grubhub is mentioned like 4 different times in this episode in a way that never feels honest. Although I do love me some Grubhub. Anyway, that's not a good way to do product placement. Anyway, so at the end of the episode, the big twist is that the mom isn't actually an illegal immigrant. She's actually an illegal alien from an alternate universe where an apocalypse happened. Oh, and actually, ICE, after going over the entire episode how bad ICE was, turns out it wasn't ICE, it was the Men in Black. So enjoy your twist on top of a twist. Honestly, it feels like there were 2 bad ideas in this episode sandwiched together into an awful idea. It's like, what if ICE was worse was a good enough premise on its own, but then sidestepping it sideways into actually the Men in Black and actually alternate dimensions, that just seems like the opposite of good sci-fi. Like, good sci-fi should be an allegory for real-world events, but this episode uses real-world events to backstep badly into some sci-fi bullshit. And that's dumb because it like understates the real-world consequences and the actual crimes that ICE is committing that this episode is trying to highlight. Ugh, this episode is a complete disaster. I feel like maybe if they like did this episode in a different order of events, it would be entertaining. Oh, and then here's the worst part of it. So at the end, the white woman and her maid escape the ICE prison, and they escape by giving all the ICE officers ice cream. Get it? Ice cream. Because they're ice. Oh my god, Jordan Peele, you have not lost your comedy black heart. Oh, and then she's saved by an ice cream truck. Because all those words contain the word ice. Because ice is bad. I think they pushed the ice cream metaphor just way too hard. So then she gets back to her house, and the entire family is afraid of her because they found out she was an alien, and then she immediately gets captured by the Men in Black, or ICE again. Oh, and way too many on-the-nose illegal immigrant allegories. So the ending is that ICE is bad and that all people were at one time immigrants. This episode gets a D because it's like way too corny. I almost want to give it an F because it is the cringiest, stupidest, and worst episode of the season. Even though it's tackling what should and is a real problem in society. And the ending also gets a D because the ending is just like a straight up like morality finger wag about ICE should not be a thing. Which I do agree with, but this is not the way to do it. Ugh. So, moving on, episode 9. Episode 9 is about a magical cursed gun that kills people. To prove wrong the old saying that guns don't kill people, people kill people. But in this case, it is literally a gun killing people. Now, for whatever reason, the gun is either possessed by a demon or it's cursed or a ghost or something. I don't know, the whole episode is kind of like a long game of chicken to either figure out, like, why is the gun killing people or to get killed by it. So some drama accumulates where the owner of the gun is going through like a vicious divorce, and it seems like the gun wants to like kill his wife or kill his wife's lawyer, and the gun can kind of communicate by showing the name of the person it wants to kill on its bullets. Then the owner does like a bunch of drugs and he sees like a Spanish ghost, and then the owner goes crazy and he thinks the gun is going to kill someone named Jeff, and oh no, his name is Jeff too. So he goes completely crazy and he decides he's going to be friends with the gun, but the gun like won't be satisfied until it kills someone named Jeff. So it's probably going to kill him, right? No, actually, this episode actually has a twist ending, and the twist ending is that it has a happy ending, which kind of makes it one of the best twist endings in the entire show. Jeff ends up killing a scumbag murderer named Jeff, who was like trying to rob his house. And that breaks the curse and gets him a complete happy ending win. He gets everything he wants. On top of that, he releases the gun, and the gun is immediately found by some kids, and the show implies that the kids will probably kill each other with the gun. This episode gets a B, the ending gets an A for honestly surprising me with the happy ending twist. Alright, the last episode of season 1. So the last episode they whip out the A-list talent again, and they have a story starring Hollywood's richest drug dealer, Seth Rogen. And he's in this bogus story about a man who writes a story about a nuclear war, and then immediately finds himself inside an actual war. Now, is this man God, or is this just a wacky coincidence? Wait. No, that's a cop-out. That's actually not what the episode is about. That was a trick. The episode is actually a meta fourth-wall breaking reboot thing, and oh no! Did you guys see Matrix 4? This episode is literally Matrix 4. Ugh, god damn. I might have been able to take this episode seriously if I had seen it before Matrix 4, but it's been like 2 years since Matrix 4 came out, and literally this episode has the exact same plot of Matrix 4, so I'm just like, why? Oh wait, no, it's not exactly like Matrix 4. There's also like a Slender Man knockoff in this. So maybe it's like a meta reboot of the Twilight Zone with also this like Slender Man slasher killer. I'm still mad about the Seth Rogen bait and switch though. Oh wait, no, it's a triple twist. She actually then goes into the post-apocalyptic world from the cold opening? Or is it from the original 60s Twilight Zone? Oh, wait. Is the blurry Slender Man the ghost of Burgess Meredith? Oh, no. This episode is actually really clever. Because Burgess Meredith in that old Twilight Zone episode had bad eyesight, and everything he saw was blurry. Oh, actually, complete quadruple twist. So the blurry Slender Man guy is actually the ghost of... Weird. So weird. Now, the show does a bad job, like, replicating They got, like, an actor who kind of sounds like him, but he also sounds fundamentally wrong. I guess it's, like, better than nothing. So, yeah, the ending of the last episode of The Twilight Zone is that they reboot The Twilight Zone. Exactly like Matrix 4. Ugh. But hey, at least the ending was actually tastefully beautiful in a much better way than Matrix 4, and I think I actually respected this episode a lot more than I did Matrix 4. Alright, that's my complete review of Season 1. If you guys like this, come back in 1 year and I will watch Season 2 in a year, because I don't want to watch it right now and I'm weird like that. Alright, thanks guys. Please subscribe. Good night.